how the West will not come to Ukraine's rescue militarily. A key example was the entire fighter jet transfer saga. So what exactly happened, and why is Ukraine not getting fighter jets from Poland? Ukraine had repeatedly called for fighter jets from the West, jets that Ukraine can use to protect its airspace. The Ukrainian Air Force uses Soviet-made MiG-29 and Sukhoi fighter jets, but its air force is far outnumbered by the Russian ones. So Ukraine wants more fighter jets to defend their skies. Ukraine probably has around 37 to 70 MiG-29s, and all of them inherited from the Soviet Union back in 1991. Ukrainian military pilots are not trained to fly US fighter jets. They are far more equipped to handle a MiG or an Su plane. So what they need currently are jets from the former Soviet nations. The most obvious choice, of course, is Poland, which is why the NATO nation was looking into a three-way deal with the United States. Poland would donate its old MiGs to Ukraine. In return, it wanted US F-16s as a replacement. But here's where the problem comes. Transferring fighter jets to Ukraine is not easy. Polish pilots can't fly them to Ukraine, and this is because Polish pilots are NATO pilots. And this could mean a direct involvement in the conflict. So here's what Poland proposed. It offered to send these jets to the US Ramstein base in Germany. Poland's proposal reflects its own sensitivity. The country is, of course, a part of NATO, but it does not want direct conflict with Russia. And neither does the US, which rejected the proposal outright. Because if the jets were transferred by US troops from a NATO territory, it would then raise the same problems and questions. Currently, neither of the two sides, that is Poland and the US, want to be direct stakeholders in the conflict. The only loser here is Ukraine, that is not getting the fighter jets that it desperately needs. Now, to discuss this more, we still have our guests on this broadcast, Ina Sovsun from Kiev and Peter Klepp from Brussels. Ina, I'd like your perspective on this. US Vice President Kamala Harris, as we understand, is now heading to Poland to discuss how to provide military assistance for Ukraine after Washington rejected Warsaw's offer for fighter jets. How do you perceive this development? Is NATO divided at this point in this conflict?
Well, it appears they are. And also, I think that they are slightly misconceiving the reaction of Putin, frankly speaking, because the world has to understand that Putin doesn't really need a real reason if he wants to engage with NATO states. If he would want to engage with the NATO states, and he already said that he wants to, he already said that he doesn't like Poland in NATO, he doesn't like Hungary in NATO, he doesn't like the Baltic states in NATO, he has issues with Finland and Sweden's neutrality. So if he wants to invade, he will invade. And that is a difficult thought to grasp, that is a difficult reality to take on, but the world needs to understand that he doesn't really need a real reason to invade in case he wants to do so. He can claim that he doesn't like the colors of the Swedish flag because they're the same as Ukrainian, and that can be the reason for invasion if he decides so. Just like in Ukraine, he didn't really have a real reason to invade. He made them up. And that is important to understand and just to accept. And now this saga, as you rightly called it, is, frankly speaking, is just it's just what it is. It's discussion about technicalities, while we have people being killed every hour here. Just this morning, a new attack killed 2 babies under 1 year old, bombarded from air again, and we get that every single day. And now just pretending that that these technicalities can prevent Putin from invading. I do think that is a misconception. I very much believe that Putin is as crazy as we all believe he is. And if he wants to invade, he will find reasons to invade anyways. So what we're asking for now is just to allow us to stop him at the earlier stages, to allow to make sure we don't have that many casualties as we can have. That is why we're asking for those jets so very, very badly. All of us, parliamentarians,
right.
Everyone else.
Ina, I just want to interrupt you there, and I want your perspective on an update just coming in. Now, Ukraine says that it is open to Russia's neutrality demand, but won't yield territory. Now, this is the report that's just coming in. Once again, is this a sign that Ukraine is willing to make concessions in this war?
Well, wouldn't be able to comment on that because that is just coming up. So we didn't have any communication with the president or the government on this specific issue. But again, neutrality or not, that is mainly a political statement, right? It's not a legal decision to be made. So I don't really know how to comment on that right now. It's just that we all understand that regardless whether we are officially neutral or not, again, that would never be a reason for Putin to stop a potential invasion.
Right. Peter, I'd like you to comment on the same. Do you see a certain change in tone or stance in the Ukrainian president? Is he willing to accommodate or compromise to a certain extent? The recent update, of course, that we have is that Ukraine seems to be open to Russia's neutrality demand.
Well, frankly, not really. I remember some time ago also Zelenskyy said something similar. And I think the problem has never been that Ukraine was not open to diplomacy. The problem is, of course, Russian aggression. I mean, to go back to the issue of the jets, I think that's actually very tricky. And what happened was that ultimately the Pentagon overruled those in the states that were open to providing jets to Ukraine. Now, it's of course true that Putin is very incalculable, and that if he wants to, he can come up with an excuse to attack any NATO state. But that's not the same as to say that NATO states should intervene and should mingle in this conflict. And it's very unclear from what point they would be intervening, but many believe that providing fighter jets would cross that line.
Right, absolutely. Just some final comments from both of you as to where you see this conflict, this war rather, headed in the next few days. Ina, I'd like to ask you for your final remarks on this. We've seen big American giants such as Starbucks, McDonald's and other big companies leave Russia as it is under heavy sanctions, sweeping sanctions imposed by the West. Is anything going to faze President Putin at this point?
Oh, before I start answering that, I just got a message from my team, and they sent a message by the Mariupol deputy mayor, and he says that about 10 minutes ago, so about half an hour ago, the Russians have bombarded a maternity hospital in Mariupol with many women who were about to give birth or just gave birth, now dead.
Right, Ina, we'd like to confirm that at our end as well, before we air this sensitive information, of course. So we'd like to confirm the same at our end as well.
But, well, that is what they have been doing. And there is no excuse for what they're doing here in Ukraine. And I really do not think that there is any diplomatic solution to the situation, except for just militarily kicking them out of the country. So what we expect is just more support from the West. And we are seeing that the sanctions are doing its toll. We are seeing that the sanctions are weighing in on the Russian economy. It's just that this is happening too slowly. And we want that to be happening faster, because every day of delay, every day of discussing the more diplomatic solution to the sanctions or to the jet issue, they all lead to new death here in Ukraine. And that is what we want to avoid.
WION World is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news updates on the move.